Hey friends, Jill here. Welcome back to a Spring Willow Farm. I am in my lovely raised bed garden this morning, sipping on some sweet coffee, which a little sneak peek that huge, large fall launch that we're doing. You guys can expect these lovely handmade mugs from our dear friends over at Old Dog Pottery. So make sure you stay tuned next week for the video and the release of these, along with a lot of other fun stuff we're working on. But yesterday I sat down with a friend and I was finalizing, I really wouldn't even say finalizing, I was figuring out my crop plan. And I remember for years and years as a gardener and a grower, I never had a crop plan. I never really understood the importance of a crop plan. And I definitely didn't determine my season based off of a crop plan. So in years past, what I would do is I would grab my cup of tea or my cup of coffee in the winter time and I'd start flipping through those seed catalogs. And I would literally just purchase whatever I thought was cool, fun, I knew my family liked, and I would kind of just plant willy-nilly, right? I didn't really have much of a system. I knew that some things preferred to be planted with other things and some things didn't. So, I had a general idea. However, I did not draw out a crop plan. I did not figure out, my 4 seasons and grow accordingly as far as crop rotations, time to have a cover crop and add amendments back into my soil. And those were just things that for years and years I didn't do. Now, there have been even recent years that I've went out into my garden and I've sown willy-nilly, right? I just grew what sparked joy, and there is value in that. But from an efficiency standpoint, from a productive standpoint, that's really just not how you should do things. Now, if your goal is not to sell, if your goal is not to pack your freezer or, can all these things, you just want to grow because it brings you joy, then I think there is a place for that. But for my family's purpose, we were growing to sell to market. We were growing to stock our pantries. And so my crop plan this year is one super essential for that, but also based off of my goals. And I would tell you guys that as well. Even if your goal isn't to sell, even if your goal isn't to put up X amount of tomatoes or X amount of green beans, it is still good to kind of have a goal and a vision in mind. And so in years past, our goal was to grow enough to sell. Last year, while we were moving and transitioning to our new farm, we did not can really at all. And so we are running through our reserves this winter. Nathan and I have done calculations of all the things that we have. And so I know a big emphasis of what I'm growing this year is going to be for food storage, to put back, canned salsa, diced tomatoes into, on my pantry shelf, or stock in the freezer with green beans. We want to can some squash and things like that. And so that's really kind of the emphasis of my plan. And I wanted to show you guys loosely what my crop plan looks like. One thing I will tell you too is figure out your plan before you're ordering seeds. That way you're not just wasting money. That is also something I was guilty of in years past, that I'd grow things and then turns out I've had these things for years and years and I've never grown them. I'm also thinking about from a storage perspective. So this year we're going to be growing a lot of, butternut squashes, spaghetti squashes, acorn squashes. Like butternut squash I can store for 9 months. That's a long time. We just harvested all those radishes. Those will be good for months and months. Thinking about root vegetables, beets, carrots, those things that are going to store for months and months, it makes a lot of sense to grow them because then I will have them for a longer period of time. So I'm hoping you guys will be able to see it. We do have it for winter 2021, spring 2022, summer 22, fall 22, and winter 2022. So that is how we prefer to do it, be an entire year ahead. Now this can change, which is why you'll see this is all done in pencil and not really in pen, but this gives me a good idea of what I think I want, and then that will tell me a good idea of what I currently have in the garden, what I need to order, what I already have. So once I do this, then I'll get a kind of an assessment of what I want, and so then I'll start rummaging through my seeds and I'll figure out what I actually have. Do I have enough? Do I need to order more? Is it cheaper to order bulk than just a couple packages? And so I'm gonna hopefully show you guys, this is the current layout of my garden. So here is the raised bed garden. Over here is where we had our sunflowers this year. So now I have my garlic, and then down here is the tunnel. So I know over here I've only planted garlic, but I still have shallots and onions, so those are things that I will have to order. I buy all of that from Dixondale Farms. Last year I actually put all my stuff in around the end of January, which was kind of early, but they did really well. So that's probably what I'm going to do again this year. And then up here, we kind of have where we have our bachelor buttons, our foxglove, our sweet peas. We have this half, covered. And then we have cover, and then brassicas. And so what that means is I'm going to plant a cover crop on them or just heavily mulch them through the winter, which is something you hear me talking about a lot. Don't just leave a bed bare to be exposed, especially if you have harsh winters. You don't want that soil to become compacted and things like that. So what we will either do is like lay a black tarp on it, we'll plant a cover crop, we'll heavily mulch it with leaves, pine needles, whatever it is that you have. And so this is kind of the current state of the garden. And then down here for the tunnel, we've got all of our flowers on either side and then our 4 beds of brassica. All right, so now we're gonna hop over to our spring 2022 crop plans. I hope you guys can see that and that it's focusing. So essentially a lot of it is the same, right? Because we're gonna still have all of our overwinter flowers, which are just now starting to bloom in the spring. So this is pretty much the same. The only difference is these 4 beds right here that are behind the pergolas, where they were cover crop, we'll immediately start going in and planting our carrots and our beets. And now here's the fun part. Here is the summer 2022. And so it really is vital, right? Because I'm able to lay it out on paper. Okay, when I have, the bachelor buttons coming out of the raised bed garden, what am I going to replace them with? And so what we have them being replaced with, so right now in the 3 beds to my right, we have sweet peas, feverfew, foxglove, and bachelor buttons, and then Ami and Dara. And when we harvest those from the early spring, we're going to be able to let them go longer into the spring if we follow those with things like tomatoes and peppers, and I left a question mark because I still have 1 more bed to fill, versus if I wanted to fill this bed with, let's say, like cucumbers or beans, something that I could plant out earlier. That wouldn't make a lot of sense because I'd either have to be ripping up my flowers earlier, causing us not to have as high of a yield on those as we could have, versus if I waited and planted something that really prefers to be planted later because it's a heat-loving plant, like a pepper or a tomato. And so that's why I think it's really good to kind of figure out these crop plants, because you can kind of nail down those things a bit better and really kind of play around with your garden and utilize it to the best of your ability, and really utilize all the seasons of your garden as well. And so we'll have on this side, when the flowers come out, we'll have tomatoes and peppers and then something else. And then the left side of the garden, which is over here super lush and full, we have all of our brassicas in, we've got our lettuce, we have some beets and carrots. That is all going to be followed, which is all vegetable production. That'll all be followed by flowers. And there are flowers that we'll plant in the summer, like dahlias. So we're actually going to be doing like 2 or 3 beds of dahlias. And so those will be blooming in the fall. And so we'll really probably ramp up production in the tunnel, since I know that half of the raised bed garden is going to be designated to summer flowers that we're growing through the summer and harvesting in the fall. And so the tunnel, I think we're really just going to kind of emphasize on having heirlooms out in the raised bed and hybrids in the tunnel, which is what a tunnel, does and thrives with, is hybrid varieties. They grow really well in that atmosphere. They're able to just kind of crank out production. So that's kind of the vision that we're doing. We're going to do a lot of side-by-side comparisons this summer. We're going to talk about the differences in growing heirlooms and hybrids, how they did just in different environments, and all those things. So I think that that's going to be really fun and honestly just really beneficial. And we're going to really do it production style in there too. We're not going to be growing on the cattle panels. We're going to be trellising all the way up to the top. Doing like the lower and lean methods with our tomatoes. We're going to be growing, production high yield cucumbers. And so that's really going to be the goal of the tunnel, is to really just emphasize on that for those high yield producing crops. And then over here where we have all the onions, the shallots, and the garlics, when those start coming out, we'll immediately replant those with your butternut squashes, all your winter nuts, all your winter squashes, and things like that. And so we've kind of now, have a really good idea. Fall, we're still going to be able to grow tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers in the tunnel. We'll probably even have some lettuces and herbs and things like that. We'll cover crop some. And so it really is super beneficial to be able to draw this out, because now what I can do is I can take my crop plans down into my basement. I can spread all my seeds out. I can look and say, okay, I'm wanting to plant 2 beds full of heirloom tomatoes. I'm gonna go grab all of my heirloom tomatoes, and I can go through and look at my notes and figure out, okay, I really liked growing the Kellogg's breakfast because it wasn't acidic, it had a really fruity taste, I didn't have a lot of pests on it. Or, you know, maybe I want to grow, I don't know, like a pink boar, and I know that that one's probably not going to be so much as a production one. It's just these small little ones. They're beautiful. They're just nice to eat fresh. So having this plan here, I can go through and figure out my seeds. I can figure out what I need to order. And also same too with the tunnel is I can figure out what I'm growing in there and what I'll need to order as well. The benefit of doing this in seasons too is if you have a budget for your farm or your garden, you're able to, you know, this winter I could use an allotted budget to buy my spring and summer seeds, or then I can wait until the summer, you know, or, you know, not the end of summer, but maybe the middle of summer, and I could spend my next allotted budget for the fall and the winter seeds. You don't have to buy all of these up front. Usually what I do is I buy for the entire year, because most places like Botanical Interest, Johnny's, Haas Tools, you get free shipping after, you know, a certain amount. And so for me, I like to figure it out. I like to go in, figure out my budget, figure out where I'm going to be buying these seeds, and just buy everything for the year. And then if I need to go back in and add some things to it, I will. Primarily, most of the places I will be buying my seeds from this year are Haas Tools. They have a really good selection of heirloom and hybrid varieties. I will also be buying from Johnny's just because they have a lot of really good bulk options. And then I do like to buy a lot of my flower seed from Botanical Interest. Our bulbs, we'll be buying those from farmers and just having them shipped into us. And so the tubers are a bit different for the dahlias, but everything else, that's what I'm going to be doing. I have really kind of honed in on the companies though that I really like. I used to grow from one company every single year, and I just didn't have really good germination rate. I mean, there were some funky cool varieties, but for what I was trying to accomplish, I just was kind of let down. And so I realized I'm going to have to maybe not grow as many crazy varieties and really focus on production. And that's what we're trying to do this year. I will have arches up on quite a bit of the beds in the garden to be able to grow things like my pole beans, to be able to grow things like tromboncino squash, maybe some Armenian cucumbers. And so I am going to definitely still have a very true to me Jill style garden. I'm just going to put as many trellises as I can. That's one of the really cool things about vertical gardening too, is I can lay all this out, and I'm pretty sure on my summer garden plan you guys can see here we have little arches drawn, and we're saying what we're gonna put there. And so I do like to allot myself one bed every single year as an experimental bed, and so that probably will not be one of my 48-foot long beds, because that's a really large bed to experiment with, but one of these little beds back here is probably a really good bed to try a new variety in. And that's something I do encourage you guys to do when you're jotting this down. This helps be efficient. This helps, you know, not overspend on seeds and amendments and things like that. So this is, I feel like, essential for a good production and just putting in good systems on your farm. But give yourself grace to try something new, because you're honestly just never gonna know if you like a variety, if you enjoy how it tastes, storage, pests. You're never going to know those things until you grow it and figure it out. So I do encourage you, give yourself a space, maybe a smaller space in my area, to try and grow those experimental things just to see. And you never know, one of those things could be like a showstopper on your farm, could be one of those things that you grow every single year. Either it's a staple for your family, if you're growing for market, it's a staple at the market. And so definitely know that there is room in that. Yeah, I mean, find what sparks joy and grow that in abundance, right? I still believe that 100%. I'm just doing that on a much smaller scale, and I'm growing a lot of the things that I know are true, and they're going to be able to stock my pantry, because that's kind of my shift and my goal for our family this year. But I did want to show you guys these crop plans, show you kind of what they looked like, so you guys can kind of get a gauge and start working on this now. I mean, we are in November, but January, February, they'll be here before we know it. That is when I am starting my seeds, is usually in February every single year. So these are things that you need to get ahead of the game on. You need to be ordering your seeds and be thinking about those. So I hope this was a helpful video. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. But thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll talk to you soon.